Okay, we're ready to start.
Okay, well, good morning and welcome. Baradara Chroiso. For the purposes of the recording, my name is Ian Moore and I am the chair of the Standards Committee. I can confirm that the committee officer has conducted a sound check before the start of the meeting, so I assume everyone can hear me. Please wave if you can't. Super. I welcome everyone to today's meeting where we're all attending remotely. The meeting will be recorded and will be available for viewing afterwards. For those viewing the recording, committee members are identified with an asterisk next to their name. If you wish to speak, please use the raise hand function or raise your hand in the video and I'll do my best to notice. You can also use the chat facility to indicate a wish to speak, but whilst I'll do my best, I may not be able to monitor that throughout the meeting. All the microphones will be muted. If you've indicated your intention to speak, you'll be invited to turn your microphone on when I call on you to speak. If you do have to leave your device for any reason, could you please ensure that your sound is muted and that you turn your video off? Okay, let's move on to the agenda then. Item 1 is apologies for absence. Can I ask Sally if we have any of those?
Yeah, apologies have been received from Councillor Delith McRae and also Hazel Jones.
Thank you. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Can I remind members that they must declare the nature of declared personal interests as well as their existence? Can I invite anyone who has an interest to declare to do so now? Okay, I don't see any of those, so we'll move on from there. Item 3 is urgent matters. Has anything arisen since the agenda was published, Sally?
No, not aware of any, Chair.
Okie dokie. So we're on then to item 4, monitoring officer issues, and perhaps I could start off by welcoming our new monitoring officer, Rhyn ap Gareth, to the Standards Committee, and hand over to you for item 4.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's a pleasure to be here. It's not in the circumstances I would ideally want. It'd be really nice to meet you all face to face, but it's great that we're able to meet anyway, isn't it? So yeah, I first of all, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'll be hopefully the meeting this morning won't be too long for you, but I'll give you a brief update of certain things which have arisen since the last meeting. We have a couple of matters before the Ombudsman at the moment. I'm not going to go into any detail on those. There will be items which might come to you later on in the year, but we have a couple of matters before the Ombudsman. One thing I thought I should raise with you is the Local Government and Elections Act, which is now an act and has gone through the Senedd, and with statutory instruments also coming in. And it will have some effect on the Standards Committee going forward. Specifically, community and town councils will have to have a training plan, which I think is a very good move forward. And obviously, the team here will be assisting down the line. We are preparing our own action plan. As you can imagine, there are quite a lot of different aspects to the Act, affecting different areas of both county, borough and community town councils, which won't directly affect you, but does affect constitutional matters. But generally, we will be trying over the next year, engaging with community councils to make them aware of their new obligations under the Act, which includes training plans, annual reports, publishing these training plans as well. So I think that is a positive move forward as far as I'm concerned. There are changes coming in with the Act, which will mean the Standards Committee will have to monitor compliance of certain additional matters which leaders of political groups need to undertake. But these changes won't be coming in until May 2022, so we've got enough time to bring you up to speed with those changes. So they haven't been even laid down in regulation yet. So, but I thought I'd just bring it up now, just to forewarn you about additional stuff that might be coming your way in the next year or so. There'll also be a mandatory annual report from the Standards Committee as well, which is something which is now in the legislation. But again, that won't be the first legislative report, won't be until the end of the financial year 22-23. So you know, there's enough time, but I thought I'd just bring it up. So those are the only items which I have at the moment, but if there's any questions, obviously I'm more than happy to respond.
Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe.
I chair a committee at the North Wales Police, a diversity committee, and we were talking about the forthcoming election. My understanding is that anyone over 16 is allowed to vote in the Assembly elections. Are you aware whether or not people of 16 can vote in the Police and Crime Commissioner? They didn't know. And of course, you'll be going into the same room to vote for two people, and one may not be available to 18 to 16-year-olds. Do you know that?
Yeah, I believe, Chad, that my understanding is that under 18s are for the Senate election, and they will be for local government elections next year, but the police and crime will be 18 and over. And that, as you can imagine, that creates quite a lot of difficulties for our election team in terms of registration and so on. And yeah, it's not ideal for us in terms of administrating either. But you make a good point, and it's something I should probably have raised in my introduction. Of course, we will be coming to a pre-election period in the next few weeks, and just for you as a standards committee, we have been advising members and officers in terms of their roles and responsibilities during that period, and also, you know, the guidance is quite clear about electioneering and the use of council property and so on. So just to be you aware that there has been guidance prepared on that one.
Thank you. Any further comments for Rin? Nope. Okay, in which case we'll move on to item 5, feedback from independent member attendance at meetings. I think I'm the first to go on this one. Since our last meeting, I have attended a staff committee and a full council meeting at Conway Town Council on the 18th of January. The staff committee was a relatively short meeting, but I should report that there were no declarations of interest made at this staff committee meeting, despite the fact that the agenda included an item, a personal item relating to an officer with whom 2 of the members of the staff committee had been in dispute. Whilst it turned out that the item was an update for information and there was no vote taken, nor were any representations made by the 2 councillors who had been in dispute, I was still surprised that no declarations were made and that the 2 councillors remained in the room. Other than that, the meeting ran relatively smoothly. The clerk provided effective assistance for the chair in the running of the meeting, issuing appropriate reminders where necessary, although not raising any points about the declarations of interest. Moving on to the full Conway Town Council meeting that I attended afterwards, that was a much lengthier meeting, running to close on 3 hours. Fair to say it was very well chaired for such a lengthy meeting. A number of items required resolution on that particular occasion. So I think the chair did a sterling job in keeping everybody focused. I think it's fair to say that the meeting was generally very good-natured. There were a few instances where there was some very vociferous opinions voiced, but I don't think they ever went to the point of being beyond what would be expected in this forum. In general terms, there's probably not much else to say. Dissenting views were expressed respectfully, and for a lengthy meeting, I think it went off extremely well. There were no declarations of interest made at the beginning. Towards the end of the meeting, one of the councillors abruptly left the meeting, the chair explained that they believed that that councillor may have had a declaration of interest to make, and that technical problems were preventing her from doing so. So it appeared that in the absence of the ability to do things, they left the meeting to be on the safe side, which occurred to me as the most appropriate thing to do. That's it from me on that particular item. I believe, Anne, Brenda, you've also attended some. I don't know which of you would like to speak on that.
Shall I speak first, Chair?
Anne, yes, please go ahead.
Okay. I attended a meeting on the 15th of February. After a prompt start and a welcome from the Mayoress, apologies were taken from 2 councillors. Declarations of interest were given at this meeting, Councillors Hart and James declaring they were married, and also that they did have a dispute with a member of staff. So that was declared at that meeting. The chair reminded councillors to declare any interest should anything crop up during the meeting. They had a speaker, Mrs. Wendy Jones. She spoke on a consultation paper regarding reducing coal and wood emissions. And this was followed by many questions, several questions, with some excellent suggestions and positive input. It was a very busy agenda, and I think you commented on the chair. She was excellent. She moved things along very well. The minutes of the previous meeting were checked for accuracy, proposed and seconded, with parties not in attendance at those meetings being careful to point out that they would not be voting. They continued to discuss in detail 2 planning applications. A late declaration of interest was made at this point. And I got the impression that the declaration had been made at a previous meeting and it was just being enforced. And my overall impression was that the meeting was very orderly, with plenty of inputs from all concerned and extremely well chaired.
Thank you.
So I had quite a positive outcome there, really. I also attended the meeting on the extraordinary meeting on the 22nd of Feb, but I am conscious Brenda was there as well. I don't know whether Brenda wants to report on that one or whether she wants me to continue.
Should I say, Chair, that I did attend both meetings.
Yes.
Anne and I have had conversation following the meetings. So nothing she's saying is coming as a surprise to me. I'd certainly want to reinforce on what's been said so far, how impressed I was with the chairing of the meeting. Again, it was quite a long meeting, but it was very well chaired. There was good summing up and good discussion. So I'm happy if Anne's happy to carry on with the second one, perhaps I can just come in again at the end.
Fine. Okay, go ahead, Anne.
Okay, so apologies were given by 2 members. There was also present a member of the public and 2 members of the Standards Committee. Again, the meeting started promptly with a warm welcome from the chair. Declaration of interest. Once again, Councillors James and Hart declared they were married. They also said that if a name came up, they knew that they would make a point of declaring. A point was made that one of the organisations was known to all, and at which point a member explained that it would depend on whether this was a personal interest or perhaps they had a friend on the committee. If not, there was no need to step out of the meeting. All declarations were noted. The clerk gave guidance on the budget and there followed a full and frank discussion on amounts to be allocated. I should have said, I'm sorry, this was allocation of grants, this meeting. Members who had declared an interest were put in the waiting room, but the only problem came when the mayor declared an interest, and as she was hosting the meeting, she couldn't be put in the waiting room. And Reen, you're nodding. I'm guessing you've come across this problem before. because she took off her headphones and stepped back from her desk to the back of the room and said, I feel like a naughty schoolgirl, you know, because it was quite difficult because she couldn't actually leave the meeting. The clerk was asked to give some advice on the T's and C's, which she advised accordingly. All grants were proposed and seconded. There was mention of being made to be careful to include all declarations in the minutes, that they were all noted in the minutes. And what was quite nice, the meeting was closed with a thank you to all present, including the member of the public and their colleagues on the Standards Committee, which was quite nice. But again, a very orderly meeting conducted in a good business-like manner, and chaired, I've put here, chaired with a good balance of professionalism and just a little humour. So it was very pleasant to attend.
Anything to add, Brenda?
Yes, nothing of substance to add, just a couple of points to reinforce. Clearly, this was a grants allocation meeting, so declarations were quite significant. There seemed to me to be a very clear understanding of the need for declarations, and Anne has given a couple of examples. On the whole, there was a very clear process from the chair set out at the beginning, and that informed the entire meeting. So I haven't been to any town council meetings before, and this seemed to me like a good practice example of how such a meeting should be conducted. I was impressed with the chair, but I was also impressed with the effectiveness of the meeting facilitated by the chair and the clerk. The members were working together effectively to get to the outcome. Of course, it was quite an easy one because they had more money to allocate than there were grants to allocate it to. It would have been more challenging, I guess, if there'd been more applications for grant. But it seemed like a good practice example. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think in summary, it's heartening to see that the contrast perhaps between the first meeting that I attended, which was prior to the training session that we delivered, and the two that Anne and Brenda have attended, the training appears to have had a very positive impact, particularly on declarations of interest, with that receiving additional focus and the processes in place to ensure that that happens well. So that's encouraging from my perspective. Super. I think that's all of the attendances we've had since our last meeting, unless anyone's been anywhere else. Nope, that's great. Thank you for those then. We'll move on from item 5 to items, Clive Wolfendale.
I've raised my hand, Chair.
I'm sorry, Peter. I'll come to you after Clive. I'll come straight.
Okay, thank you.
If that's all right, happy to go second. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so some encouraging reports here. As you say, probably things are moving on quite nicely in Conway. I went to the ones in December, and there were still a few issues there, but it seems to be moving on nicely. So my question is, in terms of the committee's work, there are, of course, many other town councils around the county, and of course, there's the county council itself. Is it incumbent on us? Do we feel the need to either schedule or rotate or put in place some sort of rota for attending these meetings shared amongst us? Or, I mean, currently it's an open invitation, of course, or in some cases an entitlement, but whether you wanted to put something a little bit more structured around that in the circumstances is the question I have.
We have previously decided, probably going back 18 months or so, that we would aim to visit each of the town and community councils once in the 5-year cycle. So there's around 40 odd of those. So that was what we had set out, and I know we had access to a schedule of all of those meetings, and an invitation to independent members to put forward to volunteer to attend those perhaps that were geographically most convenient for them. Obviously, with the advent of majority of meetings being done online now, then that does make that a little easier. Perhaps the starting point would be, Sally, I don't know if we have an updated schedule for all of the town and community councils, whether we could circulate that again now that the membership of the Standards Committee has changed quite dramatically. I think I'm probably the only common member from the last time that we did this. So maybe we could distribute that schedule again.
Yeah,
And
that's fine.
I'd invite independent members to highlight perhaps the next council on the list that they would like to attend. Perhaps if you could indicate which ones we've already been to. I know I've been to Llandudno, and I think Delyth, McRae and Hazel have been to Abergele, and possibly one other as well. So perhaps if you could highlight on the list which ones have already been visited, Sally, that would be helpful. Thank you. Right, I'm going to come. Does that answer your point, Clive?
Yes, thanks. I think that's a good start. Maybe helpful if we could do some sort of rota or schedule just to make it a little bit more under management rather than, as I say, ad hoc, just when people feel they can attend. As I say, just getting the opportunities listed will be a good start. But I would personally prefer something a little bit more structured, and with nominated individuals against the councils, perhaps for the next 18 months or something. But in your hands.
Yeah, let's start with let's see where we go next, and then I think there's quite a target-rich environment there. So if we don't get any offers, then we'll bring it back and we'll see what we need to do to improve that. But I suspect we may get some, and then we can build on that. Thank you. I'm going to come back to Peter now with apologies. I didn't see the blue hand in the corner.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment really that it's not unusual to get late declarations of interest in the meeting, because planning applications sometimes don't become available until perhaps days before the meeting, and obviously councillors don't know until the item actually is put before them whether they have an interest. So I just raised that point so that you're aware of it.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe.
This before, but in our town council, I've been a town councillor for 40 years and a county councillor for 22, and all 22 years I've been on the planning committee. And since we've had declarations of interest, our council said that I should leave the room physically as it was, or it's the waiting room, if a planning matter of any sort arose. Well, as we all know, in the planning committees, 4 out of 5 are discussed by officers, and we never take part in that decision. But also, having been a councillor that long and lived in the village all my life, I know the history of particular buildings. And I think now I attend the meeting, give background, but express no opinion. But I really would need guidance on that. And I think all of us as members of the planning committee would appreciate guidance so that we can relate it to our various town councils.
I guess that might bring us on to item 6, which is specifically about the provision of guidance. And
yeah,
I don't know if there's anything else, Ryn, you might want to add to address Andrew Hinchcliffe's point at this point.
Yeah, I appreciate the position, because it's a difficult position for members of a planning committee where they have their own local obligations and their, the need to contribute locally, especially in a community and town councils. And the guidance has been, over the years, changed. It's adapted. There was once a time where, as you say, Councillor Andrew, it was a no-go. You wouldn't take part. And then, following the Localism Act, I think things have mellowed a little bit in terms of Well, I think the advice in our constitution is, well, you can take part, you can express an opinion, but only insofar as you can say, well, I'm expressing an opinion now, but I am more than happy to change my opinion if I hear arguments to the contrary. So I think the advice that we've always said is, well, yes, you know, so we would advise probably not to vote on any item. You can stay in, you can make observations, but in that context, that is that, you know, you haven't closed your mind. I think that's the thing here. It's predetermination, which is the issue. And because the item isn't being decided at the community council, it's decided in the county council, you can, you know, as you say, if there are local things that you're aware of, you can express those views, but with the qualification. Yeah, and I think the qualification is really important in those circumstances. That you know, I always say there's a line planning committee members should always take. Yeah, I'm listening to you, but I'm also listening to everyone else, and that's the thing, isn't it? You know, that there's no closed mind. So yeah.
Yes, that's it. I've been a councillor probably 30 years longer than most of the others. So I know what's happened before about any particular building, and I'm a local historian. So I like to tell people what's happened in the past. But as you say, I don't make any, I stop at any decision. But I think we as a group would like that, you know, put out to them, so that, because some people take part in the whole discussion, some people walk out of the room there and then, and you may have a lot of background information that would be useful to the planners there, to the people discussing the plan.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Lewis, I've got the blue hand up again. Is that from the last time, or is there something else you'd like to say at this point?
It is for the last time.
Right. I didn't notice it, and then I've noticed it again, and I've gone, oh, is there another one?
I'm used to the officer looking after me, you see, so I'll have to behave myself today.
Excellent. Okay, that's gone there. Right, that takes us then on to item 6. Now, obviously, one approach to this would be page turning each document, but as they both run to some 70 pages, that strikes me as a lengthy process, although if we need to do it, we will. Perhaps as a starting point, I'll ask each of the members of the committee to give me an indication as to the volume of comments that they have, and if those are manageable, then I'll just go one by one, and we'll collect comments from each of us. So I'm going to go in the order that I see the squares on my screen. Councillor Peter Lewis, can I ask, do you have any comments to make on either of the documents we're going to consider?
Well, Chair, I've had the privilege of actually discussing this document elsewhere.
Right.
And the only comment I wish to make was that nowhere in the document does it make it mandatory for code of conduct training for town and community councils. And that was the one issue that Sreen will be aware of I raised at the committee. Other than that, I hadn't got any comment to make on the document itself. I did compliment them, though, that there were a lot of examples there which would be very beneficial, particularly to new councillors.
Super. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Chair, can I just interrupt? I don't know if Ian wanted to present the report before you came in with comments, especially for the recording, it might be useful.
I'm happy to do that. I wanted to get some sense of how many comments people had. If we're running to 20 or 30, then we'd probably need to go through a page turn and that sort of thing. So I'm just going to quickly go through each member of the committee and get a sense of volume, and then I'll come back to Reen and we'll move forward from there. Yeah. So next on my list, Anne Bella, do you have an indication of the volume of comments you have to make on the document?
Yes, Chair, not many really. It's just a generalisation really of it. I mean, I can give it you now or later, whichever, but no specific page turning, no.
Let me just turn to others. And Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe, you may be in the same category as Peter on this.
Well, I am really. And the only thing I would say is that most town councillors are practically voluntary, but to read and digest 146 pages, it might have been a lot better to have a structured list of points rather than such huge documents for people that are probably amateurs.
Thank you. Councillor Frank Bradfield. Just give me an indication.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. My comments regarding the independent, excuse me, the independent reviews to me is very encouraging. I think, as I said at Standards some meetings ago, that the new regime in Conway Town Council are strong enough to turn this council around and make it more professional, more accountable, and more reasonable regarding the code of conduct. Regarding the present code of conduct, I was pleased that the Llandudno Town Council have issued this in printed form twice, and I'm very pleased with the code of conduct that has been printed. We've also discussed this in the Llandudno Town Council, and no doubt it will be implemented after the local elections in 22, as it was previously when the Conway Borough Council held the meetings on the code of conduct. So it looks to me a very good document. It looks to me to be a basis for discussion with the new councillors that are elected in 2022. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Frank. Brenda Bignold, just give me an indication of whether you've got lots of comments or one or two.
Not page turning, a few general comments only.
Okay, super. And Clive Wolfendale, again, give me an idea of the volume of comments.
I've probably got 4 or 5, Chair, which I can do now. Or
I'll let Rins kick us off then. It just gives us a sense of the best way to run it, and then we'll.
Just make the point. It would have been really helpful to have page numbers on this document for this purpose and others.
Super. Okay, Rin, then I'll hand over to you just to introduce the thing. It doesn't look like we're going to need to go through a page turn, so I'll let you introduce it, and then I'll come back to anyone who wishes to raise their comments for you to capture.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm quite glad that we don't have to do a page turner, because they are quite extensive documents. You know, even though both documents are more or less the same, you know, there are various differences, you know, given the town and community councils, references to clerks and so on, and their obligations with grants. But because they come from the same document, don't they? The code of conduct, and it's a guidance to the code. So the code applies to both community, town and county councils. You might be aware, this is the first revision since 2016, and the world's changed quite a lot since 2016. We've had quite a lot of changes, and of course going forward as well. You know, I was interested to hear about the problems with Zoom, and that's a new problem, and the code will have to address that in some way, and it does give some indication about social media and so on, but this is a completely new medium, so it may well be that there will be revisiting to the code generally in the years to come. I think from a personal point of view, for what it's worth, I think it's a really important document, this guidance, because it's there for the members and it's there for the public to understand the rationale behind declarations of interest and so on. It's quite a complex area, isn't it, really? If you just look at the code, it's very legalistic. It's like reading a piece of legislation, really, and it's a quite difficult document for lawyers to interpret. So I think it's really, really good that the Ombudsman has over the years provided this guidance, which gives practical examples of how he interprets the code and how it's applied. And I think for members, it's a really good practical document, and I really do like the flow chart at the back, I must admit. I think that's a really, really positive side of this, because it gives a good indication of the process involved, where you should make a declaration, etc. Just on the changes, they're quite minimal, really. The changes really relate to additional examples, which I think bring the document to life. There are a little bit more explanation about the public interest test and the twofold test which the Ombudsman undertakes when assessing whether to investigate or not, and whether to refer a matter to Standards and Adjudication Panel. So there's a little bit more guidance there. There's also, you may notice there's a section now on legal precedents, which goes to detail about freedom of expression, political expression, and thicker skin, etc. That now is in the guidance. Now, I know many county councils and town councils and officers across Wales have had a little bit of an issue maybe about how the Ombudsman interprets that at times, but at least it's there now in the guidance. So, you know, we know the position the Ombudsman is taking on it. So those are really, and there's also the guidance on what to do if you have a personal interest. I think that's a little bit more clear now than it has been. So those are really the main points. Just for your information, as Councillor Peter said, and Councillor Andrew, this went to Democratic Services on Monday, Democratic Services Committee. Well, there was a really good debate. There was a really good conversation about, and I think what it does, it highlights the code, and anything that highlights the code to me is a real positive. And there was good engagement with members. Just for your information, the matters that was raised were, as Councillor Peter said, community town council training mandatory, examples useful. There was concern that the guidance was too long, and it might be useful to condense it a little bit. Again, the flow chart useful. But one point that was made, and I think it's been picked up by other authorities, that the document really should be gender neutral and be no unintended bias. So those were picked up by the Democratic Services Committee. It is a document for you, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions. But really, I'll leave it to you to make your comments, and then we'll collate them and send them off to the Ombudsman. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rin. Peter, I think you'd said all you needed to say that last time about the mandatory training. So, Anne, I'll come to you. Would you like to go through the comments that you have on the document first, please?
Certainly. I've made a note that it seems to follow a similar format to the previous guidelines, which Rin has said. The document appears to have been amended to include more explanatory text, which I thought was useful, and supplemented by more examples. I know that's been mentioned as well. It feels more up to date than previous issues. Likely to be of assistance to both existing and the newly elected officers in 2022. I considered they were pitched at the right level of complexity, personally. I couldn't think of anything that was missing from there or that could be improved upon. I wasn't sure regarding the training. I often wonder whether the piece on social media, I often think that could be a training, a standalone training, because it's something that we're all using at the moment. And also, obviously, newly elected members will have to do the training. Will re-elected members, I was wondering, Reen, will they have to do the training on the new code? Will all members have to do the training? I'm not sure.
Yeah, there will
all
be
members.
All members.
Oh, okay. I think that's it. I think that's all my notes.
Okay.
And I have made a note about compulsory training myself. That is something that I always think about. I put a question mark there, but I think that's everything. Yeah.
Thank you, Anne. Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe, perhaps particularly in reference to your earlier point about guidance for planning related items, does the document go far enough there? You have to come off mute, Councillor Andrew.
I think so. It's just down to interpretation, isn't it? That's the clarity that I wanted. But otherwise, yes, fine. I haven't got any big issues that Peter or Anne have produced. I've nothing else.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Frank, did you have anything else to add in relation to comments on the document?
No, Chair, but listening, I just wonder, I come from an industry that had very strict compliance. And I just wonder, I don't mean compliance in a legal sense where action would be taken, but when we're visiting councils, perhaps we should pay attention to the breadth of knowledge that they have with this code of conduct and the actions that they're taking. I mean, we've spent a year discussing Conway. Is there other other town councils or community councils needing help in the protocol of declaration for interest, for example, or any other issues under the code of conduct? It's no use having a library book called a code of conduct and people pay lip service to it. I think we should be helping community councils to put it into 100% practice. And I do like the code of conduct. We must have a protocol and it must be adhered to. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Frank. Brenda Bignold.
Thank you, Chair. Well, as a new member of this committee, I'm not familiar with the existing guidance, so I wasn't able to identify any changes. I was just looking at these as they stood. And in that respect, I found them clearly written and they were helpful to me. And therefore, I thought they would also be helpful to councillors generally. People have already mentioned the examples. I thought that was probably the most useful part of the guidance. I definitely honed in on the examples, and from my point of view, that gave me a broader view of the work of the Standards Committee. So it was useful to me at this stage of my development, and I could see that they were first-hand examples that would be useful to others. I also found the flow diagram very helpful, and I thought the content in the guidance about personal and prejudicial different interests, the difference between them, how they might apply, which was taken in some detail. I thought that was also helpful. So generally, as I say, I haven't got any background, but looking at the guidance as it was, I thought it was useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. Clive Wolfendale, you make your comments on the document, please.
Thank you, Chair. If we start by picking up a comment a couple of others have made, which is it's on the third page of the Ombudsman's preface on the Community and Town Council document, on the first page of the introduction on the local authority document for county councils. On the first page of that one, in bold, is the comment from the Ombudsman: I expect all members to attend training and take advice where it is offered, which is a bit headmasterly, isn't it? And begs the question, if not, you know, what's going to happen? You know, will they be expelled, or do you have to go into detention, or, you know, report to the study? So I think that's just not helpful, actually. I think it needs more clarity, not an expectation, but you know, this is your role on the council is dependent on you undertaking this training. Full stop. It needs to be where it's at. We can't. It's just too wishy-washy. So that'd be my first comment. Just picking up what Peter was saying, really. But I want that to be. But I can't see why it's not more closely defined. It's not helpful. So that's the first point. The second point is on the local resolution process, which I think applies particularly on the community and town councils, and of course we've got some recent experience of where this can go badly astray. So it talks about a local resolution process between members, which I think is helpful, and I think it's any sort of informal resolution process is generally helpful in whatever walk of public or private life we're in. I just wonder whether that could be extended to a resolution process between members and officers, as well as between members. Now, it would beg the question, who would administer that process? But that's not insoluble. And I think it might be really helpful in getting rid of some sort of, you know, just misunderstandings or disagreements that escalate because there's no method of dispersing them. So I just wonder whether some consideration might be given to that in terms of an addition. On the section around the adjudication panel for Wales and its particular role, I just wonder whether that's a bit top heavy, and I've considered since I've been here whether on the committee, which is not too long, of course, whether a little bit of this could be further delegated to standards committees rather than the intensely time-consuming and onerous process of batting things backwards and forwards between the ombudsman and the adjudication panel and so on. Things like suspensions and you know, where you know, our maximum sanction, as we know, is a 6-month suspension, which is, you know, in the grand scheme of things, not huge, and whether the layering of the responsibilities and the ability to impose sanctions might be further delegated. That would be my suggestion. I think the examples are helpful because it gives life to actually what we're talking about here, and they are real examples. But then there are pages and pages and pages about trying to define declarations of interest, be it personal or prejudicial, and pages and pages and pages and pages trying to define the distinction between a personal interest and a prejudicial interest. And you know, often I think if something takes that much definition, paper, time and effort, you just wonder, is it worth making the distinction at all? It's just an interest. And, you know, it's often a matter of common sense, but very tight definition as to whether your presence in a meeting, you know, is wise or not. And I think that particular distinction is, there's definitely overlap. You know, technically I can see, you know, why they might be different, but why bother? It's just confusing what is already a you know, an area that people sometimes find difficulty with, but I suspect that that's probably far too, you know, along the road now to unpick, and it's recognised in other forums as well. But I think I'm personally at the point is that I can't see the join anymore. It's just pointless. So those are my particular comments on the, apart from the fact there's no page numbers, which I thought was an omission. But overall, absolutely welcome. You know, and I think this clearly needs to be forming the basis for training and induction of members of all representative councils across Wales. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Clive. Yeah, I think in summary, it seems the document is very much welcomed. The increased number of examples certainly help to bring life to some fairly dry legislation. I think to Clive's points, I think a couple of those are relating to the legislation itself and the powers that it provides, rather than this document, which is guidance on what is currently in place. So obviously there are wishes perhaps on the part of some of us to change what is in place, but this document's job is just to explain and guide around what is currently there. I suppose the one other thing I would add, and I think it echoes a point that's made consistently, is whilst I think we would all wish to see a clear statement that attendance at training is mandatory, if the legislation doesn't give the Ombudsman the power to do that, then at the very least I would like to see an example in which someone claimed that because they weren't aware of something, then it should not be deemed to have been an issue that they went on to breach the code. And I would like to see the example showing that the Ombudsman took a significantly dimmer line on that clause because the individual concerned had not attended training. I think if we can't make it mandatory, then a very clear example that shows the consequences of choosing not to attend training would be very helpful. I'll hand back to Rin just in case you need to comment.
There are a few hands raised, Chair. Councillor
Sorry,
Peter Lewis and Councillor Chris Cater.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. Peter, I will come to you as I missed you again last time. Peter Lewis.
Well, thank you, Chair. Really following on from what Clive has had to say, and I just wondered whether or not the Ombudsman perhaps could be persuaded to put in bold, if in doubt, declare.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Chris Cater.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, for letting me come in. Just referring to the Democratic Services Committee on Monday that we had, I think a couple of the county councils that also sit on the smaller community councils, the rural ones, was saying that they're often in the embarrassing position where they have to give the community councillors advice on the code of conduct because the clerk doesn't have a clue and never seems to have had any training, and certainly doesn't say anything at the relevant moment. And it really brings out the fact that the clerks need mandatory training, and I think that will come with powers of competence. But I'm not sure if Reen wants to comment on that with the new Act coming into force. If it's going to be compulsory for clerks to have training. I think these councillors who were speaking on Monday were very frustrated when new community councillors came on board. Perhaps there wasn't even an election, they were co-opted, and they feel they can go straight into determining things and influencing things. So that was one point. The other one was the gender neutral thing that Reen's mentioned. Yeah, there were a couple of councillors were really quite vociferous about the fact that it should be gender neutral. The very first example, as you will have noticed, that is there in the document is about a intoxicated lady councillor inappropriately behaving at a street party. It was felt, why should it be pointed at the ladies straight in the very first example when we're hoping for more diversity and more balance in membership of both the principal councils and also the community councils. So that was the other thing. But yeah, it's the flow chart's very interesting at the end, and I think that's what I think provides a lot of clarity. Particularly, I'm a member like Councillor Peter and Councillor Andrew on the planning committee, and you do need clarity. I mean, it has to be clear when your interest moves from personal to prejudicial.
Thank you, Councillor Chris. Councillor Frank Bradfield.
Thank you, Chair. I dislike staff being miscalled. Clandino have 3 staff. One is in a course learning Welsh, quite rightly. The other is in a course learning legal matters, quite rightly. But these courses are expensive. If we have a rural community council, do they have the resources like Clandino has to send these clerks to courses? That is the issue, because I'm sure these clerks will be enthusiastic and they would like to attend courses, but do the local councils have the resources to send the staff and courses?
Can I come back on that point that Frank's made?
Please do, Councillor Chris.
Yeah, just to say that the initiatives we're trying to launch at the moment is to try and have clusters of the smaller community councils, so that there would be a clerk who would be properly trained and so on for a cluster of them. You know, there are so many community councils that we were talking with the Llanrwst clerk at a meeting on Tuesday, and he said he tries to lead his cluster, and the number is 22. He has a cluster of 22 community councils. So yeah, Councillor Frank's quite right. A lot of these are very small entities, and perhaps their biggest expenditure is their clerk. So it would make sense that we follow on this initiative to try and get them to group together, and then they can combine to, you know, have a properly trained clerk that services all of them.
Thank you, Councillor Chris. My belief is that code of conduct training that we oversee the provision of is not charged to town and community councils. I don't know, Rin, whether you're able to comment on that, but certainly the centralised training that we've done in the past, and indeed that we provided for Conway County Council, I believe was not saddled onto Conway County Council's budget or to any other town and community council.
Correct, Chair, and you know, it is incumbent on us to train. You know, it's something that we hold dear, and it will help us as a standards committee as well, won't it? You know, if we're able to train, it will mean that people understand the code, understand the parameters of the code. So it's a really important exercise. But I think the points are made are relevant, aren't they? You know, there are lots of community councils out there, and I think that's the issue we have. And the cluster idea is really innovative, really good, but there is a need, with more responsibility coming to the town and community councils, training requirements will probably need to be extended, and what resources are going to be put in to deal with that. You know, the general power of competence, we're not sure at the moment how far that's going to go. It'll be something for us as a county council to grapple with. I'm sure for community and town councils, it'll be something that they will certainly need training on, and we'll need to liaise with them and One Voice Wales and so on in order to see what are the plans coming forward on that. So I have real great sympathy for clerks, I must admit. You know, that they are a resource. And sometimes that, you know, that they don't get there's not enough resource out there to train them, to bring them up to speed. And to be fair, it's not their fault, because, you know, it is the system we have, unfortunately. So I as I always say when they phone me, you know, I'm always available to help, but obviously we haven't got infinite resource either. So it is a bit of a conundrum, really, that one. Do you want me to sum up my thoughts, Chair, just following the discussion?
Please do.
Yeah. It's been really helpful to me to have your views, and I'm glad to see that you've picked up lots of stuff which I picked up, which is fantastic. But also there are other things which I think add to what we can send the Ombudsman. It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because what we have is a code, and this is guidance to the code, as the Chair mentioned. For your information, there is talk at the moment of reviewing the code nationally. How that will go, I'm not sure, and it won't happen in this term of the council. But I'm hoping that it doesn't go down the road of England, which I'm sure you might be aware of, isn't a system which is fully accepted in England as doing what it should. And it's down to leaders of political groups, etc., to try and control these things, where the Welsh structure, I think, is envied by a lot of authorities in England. But just to let you know that that's on the way. So hopefully we might get some clarity on certain issues when the code is reviewed. The point on you know, an interest in whether it's prejudicial or not has been something which is going around the houses for years. And I remember the days where you could declare, and I'm sure some of the members here will say, you know, you could declare, but you could stay in, and it wasn't defined what was prejudicial, whether it was a monetary issue or not, and so on. It's been adapted and changed, and I don't think there's ever going to be a perfect solution. All I would say at the moment, I, as a monitoring officer, are quite comfortable in advising, and it gives us the latitude to, with the dispensation process as well, gives us some latitude as well. But I accept the point, you know, the guidance, it goes on for quite a long time about defining the different aspects, which confirms the complexity of it, I guess. But I just a couple of things which have been raised in the monitoring officer group, which I think probably useful to you. There was mentioned that it might be useful to have an example of where the Ombudsman has applied the two-stage test and when he's decided to refer the matter to a standards committee and decided not to refer. Because I think there is a blurring the line slightly as to how the Ombudsman applies the tests at times. And I think the group thought that an example of that might be useful in the guidance. Also, there was mooting of possibly saying what the censure was in these examples. But there were two ways of thinking about that, because sometimes you would have thought the censure would have been considerably more than was applied, so it might detract people. So the Ombudsman were going to think about that, I think, whether there was a need to see you know, what censure was applied to the examples given. Some of them obviously are quite extreme, and there were adjudication panel matters which went you know, the censure was quite considerable. But I just want to thank you really for giving us the time to go through the guidance. It's not an easy document, it's quite a long document, and it really is helpful to me, and I'm sure the Ombudsman will be really glad to receive your comments, and I'll collate them over the next week. If you have any other thoughts in the interim after this conversation, by all means email me. You know, I'm more than happy to get further information if you think of something else. But on that, Chair, I'll leave it.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that raises a good point there. I would, as we noted at the beginning, we had apologies for absence from Delith McRae and Hazel Jones. I would be happy personally for them to be invited to submit any comments direct to Ryn via email, as he's just invited anything else that occurs to you to go via that route. Can I just check that no one has any issue with that? As it's outside the context of this meeting. Superb. Okay, in which case, Sally, I can ask you to just drop an email back to Delith and Hazel to say if they had any comments, they can send them direct to Ryn. In conclusion then, now we've heard Ryn's summary, can I ask that as a committee, we are able to agree to delegate our response to the Ombudsman in relation to these documents to Ryn on our behalf?
Ryn has his hand raised, Chair.
Go ahead.
So, sorry, Chair, just if I could get the responses by the end of next week, that would be brilliant, because I think that the date for closure is the end of next week. I think it's the 21st actually, but if they could get to me by the end of next week, that would be brilliant.
Thank you. Okay, with that confirmed, can I ask for a proposer that we delegate our response to Ryn? Councillor Peter Lewis, can I ask for a seconder, please? Councillor Andrew Hinchcliffe, that is passed. And
Can I just have a show of hands, please, Chair, just to confirm?
Show of hands to confirm. Thank
That's
you.
great, thank you.
So that's passed. That closes the meeting for today. Can I thank you all for your time? And I think our next meeting is an April date. Sally, can you confirm the date?
Yeah, bear with me 1 second. Yeah, I believe it's the 19th of April.
April 19th. So if anyone has anything they would like to see on the agenda there, perhaps to raise it to myself in before then, at least a week before then, that would be helpful. Okay, with that done, I think we're done for today. So thank you all very much for your time, and I will see you all on April the 19th.
Thank you,
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks,
Very
Chair.
nice to meet
Everyone.
you, Ian.
Thank
Nice
you.
to meet you.
Bye now then.
All the best.